Okay, welcome back to the 3 to Love show. I am your new host, Pablo. And Pablo, you are not the new host of this show. You are only filling in until Kate gets back. Sorry about that. Welcome back to the 3 to Love show. I am your temporary fill-in host, Pablo. And today we're going to be talking about call of sex, love, and marriage. Okay. Brian, my first question for you is, what do you think the culture would define love as? Well, Pablo, I think is a great place to start, and we'll find out just how intertwined love, sex, and marriage really are in this conversation as we do these series. But I really do think love is the best place to start, so I'm glad we're choosing that. And I think also talking about what the culture thinks of love is another great place to start. And I think it's pretty simple in my view on what the culture thinks. They don't have a definition. Scientists are trying to figure it out for themselves, doing studies. I've asked friends. They all have different definitions of love. And I think what that says is, from a broader general standpoint, is that love is whatever you want it to be. And this notion of love is sold to us in the culture of sort of this fulfilling of the ego. You know, whatever makes you happy, it's all about you. And I think when we talk about love in, you know, the movies and the TV shows or the books, it's, you know, we think of young couples typically, and they're saying, oh, I love you and I love you. And then, you know, the classic story of the senior year of high school breakup because they got to go to different colleges. And this isn't love. I mean, this is more lust, right? It's more of a, I had this strong emotional connection with you, and I had this, you know, this physical attraction, but it was never really love in the first place. And we'll talk about why. And I'll disprove this really fast, that love is just some strong feeling. And we can think about, in this agape love that we'll talk about, the family. And everyone's in a family, and especially if you have siblings, you know that there have been times when you absolutely do not feel like loving someone in your family, especially a sibling, but you still love them. And you know that because love is more than a feeling, of course, it's knowledge. It's a truth that you love someone. And so we can throw that definition away, because love is much more than that. I mean, I'd be lying if that's a little bit what I was thinking, but thank you for clearing that up. Okay, well, how about this then? Please enlighten us on what is love actually. Well, I'll put a really simple definition out there. Love is willing the good of the other. And so when we talk about the culture's definition of love, evolved around the self, it's actually quite the opposite. Love is not about you. Love is about other people. It's about how you are giving yourself, making sacrifice. There's no love without sacrifice. And so we can go back to the family example of, you are always, hopefully, willing the good of a family member, right? Parents always want what's best for their kids. You know, we support our siblings. We don't want to see them go down a dark path. And it's the same in a romantic relationship, which we'll talk about. It's always, how can I love this other person? And this is why the other definition that you'll often hear, especially in our Catholic faith, is that love is God. God is love. Either way you want to put it, because God is relationship and God is only giving. And so we can see this in the Holy Trinity, as God, you know, gave us his only Son. And the love that they share is the Holy Spirit. And so that is the working definition of love, is that it's selfless, right? And we are dependent creatures. You know, everything that we have has been given to us. And so love is useless when it's alone. And it only makes sense in union, because we all have this desire in our hearts for love. And if we were perfect beings, which of course you're crazy if you think that we are, we desire this perfection, but nobody is perfect. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we are incapable of creating love, because if we could, then we could perfect ourselves and we'd have no need of loving anyone outside of ourselves. And we know that that's not true. We all have this desire in our hearts to love, and it's a universal truth. And that's why, life is always about love, and it's always about relationships at the heart of it, because, love of yourself without God is just egotism. And I think that's what we find out in the culture, that there's this dualistic egotism going on that we call love, and it's really nothing more than just a pleasure and exchange transaction between one another. So that is the true definition of love, in that craving unity, in that total gift of self. Okay, so we've talked generally about love, but personally, I'm trying to look for love for a nice woman of the Catholic faith. So what about when it comes to that type of love? Pablo, I'm so passionate about this topic, as you know, because it brings up all this Fulton Sheen knowledge of Three to Get Married, and I'm excited to share some of this. So what I want to start off saying is that two empty glasses cannot fill each other up. There must be a fountain outside of both. And, that goes back to, again, love must exist outside of us, because if we can't perfect each other, then there must be something outside of us that is perfection. And of course, that is God. And so God is this fountain of love, and we are not love. We are only lovable. And so how beautiful it is when two people both love God and therefore love each other. And so I want to talk about one more thing that he says that's so poetic, in that there are only two words in the vocabulary of love, and that is you and always, because love is unique and love is enduring. And just so beautiful, because we all desire this intimate relationship with another person, and that may be a vocation to be with God, or it may be a vocation within marriage, as most watching probably are discerning for marriage. And so I want to talk about what Fulton Sheen says in these three types of love in relation to the culture. And so the first one, I want you to think of it like three levels of a house. And so the first level is sex love, the second is personal love, and the third is Christian love. And so sex love is something we'll talk more about, and that I've already kind of mentioned in the beginning, but it's this purely egotistical type of love where two people enter into some sort of sexual love that's very physical and emotional, and that there's no commitment, there's no formal relationship. It's what we call the hookup culture, and it's simply a pleasuring of the ego in a dualistic fashion. So what does that really mean? Well, it means that I'm going to use you for my bodily pleasure, and you're going to use me for yours, and it's going to be mutual and consensual, and we're going to call that sex love. And of course, well, as you either know from experience or from hearing wisdom of someone else, that it always gets boring, it never works, it causes confusion and frustration, and it doesn't fulfill this longing desire in our heart. So then, typically we often graduate to the next level of personal love. And personal love is where the other person is regarded as the opposite sex, and there is something more formal, and that could be a long-term relationship, moving in together, and actually marriage. But in this personal love, the other is replaceable, because there's no promise of a forever. And even the people that do get married and they say, well, I'm going to love you forever, but divorce is on the table, and we know that half of marriages do get divorced. This personal love is not unique to that other person, even if it says it was. But this personal love is a graduation from this dualism of the ego, which evolves to more of a love language, of a companionship, that you're satisfying my needs and I'm satisfying yours, and we're kind of living in this mutual, I call it a fantasy, but it's a reality to most that you can satisfy me and I can satisfy you. But that can only end in frustration. And that's what we see when most relationships are unhappy, because there comes this realization that the other person can't satisfy this deep longing in your heart. And so then we graduate to the third level, and that is, of course, Christian love, where the two understand that outside of them there is God, and that God is the ultimate good, ultimate perfection, and that through marriage, what we'll talk about in the next series, that there is this covenantal bond through the sacrament of marriage. And so you can think about it as a triangle where God is at the top and man and woman, wife and husband are down here. And instead of this dualistic relationship where the other person can't satisfy the other and that ends in frustration, now it is like this with a triangle where God is, we say God is in the center of the relationship, but it's really a Trinity relationship. Now God is outside of them both. And they both understand this reality, this truth, that only God can satisfy this infinite desire in our hearts, because there are no limits to love. And I think most would agree with that love is infinite, endless, everlasting. And that is obviously not a person. So it must be something outside of us. And that something outside of us is God. Wow, that is just very inspiring stuff, Brian. Whew. Okay, so I know we're going to be talking a little bit more about marriage and sex and how this fits into this working definition of love. So very much looking forward to that. So for everyone who's watching this video, please like it, subscribe, send it to someone if you think they need to hear it, and follow us on our Instagram accounts. We've got an English and a Spanish version for all our fam, and we look forward to seeing you the next time.